gentleman over here in the corner. What do you think the worst things are that Frank Wolf has done while he's been in Congress?
I would say that basically it is his voting record on spending. The National Taxpayers Union has now for 7 years running given Frank Wolf either he got a C plus in 2009. That was a high grade for the 6 years previous. He either got a C or a C minus from the National Taxpayers Union for his votes in Congress. Now, he probably felt he had to go along with the president, even though the Bush administration was the most fiscally profligate administration in the history of the United States until the one we have now. So I could see he'd be under pressure to go ahead and do that, but he's responsible for his own votes. He's voted for way too much spending. He voted for No Child Left Behind. He voted for the Medicare Part D. I could go on and on, but his fiscal record in terms of minding the public purse is very poor in my opinion.
Over here? You say that you would support congressional budget cuts, but would you be an advocate for a zero-based federal budget?
That's a zero-based budget. Do you mind defining that term?
It means, what I take it to mean, this was something that was bandied about when Jimmy Carter was president back in the 1970s, that instead of building on each year's previous budget, you would start the budgeting process with everything at zero and make a decision, okay, how much more than zero are we going to spend on this program each year? The answer is yes. They've tried that, or that was, like I said, that was a buzzword, I think, back in the 1970s when Jimmy Carter was president. And I would say that the first thing we've got to get away from is this whole idea that, we've programmed in an 8% increase in spending next year, but we're only going to make it 4%, so there's a 4% cut. That's baloney, and that's Washington talk these days and has been for a long time. That's the first thing we've got to get away from.
What's your position on repealing the Obama careless health care?
Repeal it. Yeah, absolutely. But we need to go farther than that, frankly. We need to get away from our whole employer-based health insurance system. It is a ridiculous manifestation from World War II, where there were wage controls at the time, and businesses competed on fringe benefits to get workers, and that's how this all came about. It was an accidental outgrowth from World War II. But we need to get away from, we have way too much in terms of third-party payers. That is the main problem in this nation. That is what is driving healthcare costs up. We don't notice that things like LASIK eye surgery, cosmetic surgery, where people control with their own dollars, the prices of those procedures has gone down over time. Everything else has skyrocketed in the medical industry, and it's because we have too much in the way of third-party payers. We need to get consumers back in control. We need to stop the culture of people expecting their health care to be paid from $1. I'm not going to lay anything out. It's all going to be paid by somebody else. We should steer people toward making small medical outlays and buying catastrophic health insurance policies.
This corner, and then the gentleman in the back.
I was wondering what your thoughts are on a balanced budget amendment. If you would, I presume you would support it, but
yes.
If you did, what possible chance would it have of passing?
I would support a balanced budget amendment. Would it pass? Yeah, it might. I mean, I think that eventually, I'm not sure it would pass right away, but I do think that certainly the $1.4 trillion budget deficits can only help the prospects for a balanced budget amendment. So I would vote for it, and I do think someday it will eventually pass.
May I ask a follow-up? Would you, rather than a balanced budget, would you consider a law that would say that the budget cannot exceed more than a certain percentage of the total gross domestic product of the United States? Because I would be concerned about a balanced budget and then it allows them to do taxes to balance the budget, which is not what I want. But they get plenty.
I would say yes. I mean, I do think there should be a provision for exigency. Maybe that's, I'm not, anyway, there's a fancy word that I can't come up, but unusual, emergency situations, which no doubt would be a part of it, but certainly.
Ron, we have time? Ron's the organizer. He said we defer to Ron.
I'd like to ask a domestic question. We just got an announcement today that the Islamic terrorists are on the march. Okay, And this isn't international. This is a domestic issue. They want to hit us here. How do you approach that? And how do you approach that?
I think that the one thing we need to communicate, which has already been communicated both by President Bush and President Obama, is that we are not at war with Islam. We are not at war with a religion. And we have to also, I think it would behoove us to take a more restrained foreign policy overseas. I think that we can't afford it fiscally, and I think we have to, in many situations, consider that we need to focus not on, too many of our defense policies are subsidizing the defense of wealthy allies where they're not paying their fair share, or we're involved in nation building. And that's not going to work in the long run either. So all I'm saying is that we need to be focused on a defense, a strong defense of the United States and the people and property in it. And if we focus on that, I think that will address a lot of that problem. I also think that we need to make sure that law enforcement here and our defense of the United States has to be adequate to anticipate those situations.
Mr. Bacon was talking about, excuse me, Mr. Bacon was talking about the difference between the small pain or relatively small pain now to control our budget versus a bigger pain or catastrophic pain in the future, which is out of sight, out of mind. And I was wondering, what you think about trying to convince the American people that we have to face that pain now as a catastrophic one. And along those lines, I want to take the example as an accountant. Do you comment on the prospect that the Treasury goes out some week soon to borrow money in the auction bill and nobody shows up? What it would mean for government spending, government employees, paychecks, Social Security, if we reach that wall where no one would lend us any more money?
Well, I think that even though people don't see or feel a potential future financial crisis right now, they have to be told that there was a statement made, the late economist Rudiger Dornbusch said that fiscal or economic crises take longer to develop than you think they will, but once they happen faster than you think they will. And that's what happened. You can look to the financial crisis in 2008. They knew back in early 2007 there were problems with subprime mortgages, yet things were good. The stock market kept going up. It peaked on October 9, 2007. I remember because it was my 50th birthday. That's the highest Dow closing ever. And then it was downhill, but no crash. And we go on and on. But now we go on, and it's not until Lehman Brothers crashes almost 2 years after we knew that there were problems with subprime mortgages, then all of a sudden things go. So it can happen very quickly, and you don't know what event is ultimately going to trigger something cataclysmic that has been building for years. And so what I would say is that ultimately, what is probably going to sell is some sort of decade-long program like Cato Institute said this week, where if we just grow nominal federal spending by 2% per year over the next decade, we could have a balanced budget by 2020. And if that's all that needs to be done, it just shows you what a shabby job our current politicians have done with the fiscal situation of the federal government going back decades.
Yeah, I was just curious, having to read the budget and all of that, how you feel about earmarks.
They're awful. I mean, it's a culture. It's something in the Washington culture that has to be changed. It's got to be changed. It's simply a part of the business as usual culture in Washington, that it's going to take a revolution, a peaceful revolution, but a revolution of the people to change. It must be changed. The rinky-dink stuff that they spend money on when we're facing entitlement problems of the magnitude we're facing is absolutely absurd, and it's immoral in my opinion.